And then I'm gonna add, another vocal right here. Shoot, let's just add some more vocals to it. I like that one a lot, but I don't like the tail of it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut out the second half of that phrase right here. Just do a little bit of a, yeah, OTT, man. Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm John with the content team. I run a few labels at Splice, 4/4, Parallax, Neon Wave, and Sample Magic. And today I'm gonna be showing you a little tutorial on how I like to build tracks from start to finish. This track is gonna be a progressive / deep house following certain labels like Colorized, Anjuna Beats, and any of those types of sounds. So let's go ahead and dive in. So right here I have a reference track which we're going to use, and the reason why I like using reference tracks is because it's really important for me to know when I'm going to start a track, how it's going to end, right? I think a lot of us are used to getting stuck in that 4-bar, 8-bar, 16-bar loop, and the problem with that is that it can be a really complicated place to really strategize and plan out where you're going to take your track, right? I think a good example of how to look at this is building a puzzle and starting with the edges first, right? And so whenever you're building a puzzle, if you start out with the middle pieces and you try to build from there, it can be a little bit disorienting. You may not know exactly where the edges are, but the purpose of doing it this way is that you're able to really dive into the track from start to finish and know exactly where you're gonna begin and where you're gonna end. And so what I have here in the session is a track that I've done before, that I've made, and we're not gonna recreate this track, but we're gonna use this track as a guide to sort of figure out the arrangement of the song from start to finish before we even begin producing. In this track right here, we can play a few seconds of it just so you can kind of get an idea of what kind of track we're gonna be making. Very deep, progressive, kind of, housey kind of vibe. And so let's go ahead and start setting up these markers in Ableton because they're gonna be super helpful in allowing us to identify where we're gonna begin and where we're gonna end our song. So from bars 0 to 1, we have what essentially I would call just the intro. This is the place where a lot of DJs mix in and out of songs. So typically you want these areas to be very minimal in terms of melodics and those types of elements, and really just focusing on drums. Usually at around bar 16 is where things start kind of taking shape, and this is usually when DJs start mixing in from your track into another track. There you can kind of hear the bass coming in. So I'm just gonna call this like the build, right? And then this is, the fill area. So at 32 bars, that's where the first drop is gonna be, and that's usually kind of, where people get introduced to the melodics of your track. Where people start dancing a little bit. If they don't know the track, they might recognize it or they may not, but they might get excited. And as you can see here, from here on out, for the most part, we're gonna be adding markers every 16 bars or so. So I'm just gonna call this again, drop 1.1 or whatever. So at this section, the drop 1.2, as I call it, this is where you start kind of building up, and then you're going to go into like a breakdown, which is really traditional and common, and especially in this type of dance music. Now we're going to go into the breakdown where all the kicks and all that kind of stuff dissipate, and it's just like a moment for people to kind of get their breath on the dance floor. So there's that, and then there's this part of the breakdown, which is just sort of like another continuation of it, where you're adding a few more elements. And then on this section right here is gonna be most likely the build, and this is gonna be going into like your big drop, your main drop. This is the area where there's gonna be a lot of fills and effects to kind of really get people excited for your track. go ahead and do this other section too, which is another part of the drop. And we got this over here, and this is going to be the outro. And then this is going to be the out mix, which is where people are going to start DJing and transitioning from your track into the next track. And it's always important in this part of your track to be able to kind of dwindle and get as much of your melodics out as possible, because this really helps the DJ to be able to mix in the melodic elements from another track into the tail of your track. And as you can see here at the end, there's really no melodics. It's just the outro, which just has percussion and drums and all that kind of stuff. All right, so now that we've set up this template, we understand where we're going to start and where we're going to finish the track with. We can start building the different elements. And one of the first things that I like doing is I like going straight into effects. And I know that for a lot of people, this might seem kind of counterintuitive to start with effects, because you're like, well, what are you doing if you don't have any melodies, any drums, or anything like that? Well, whenever I produce, I like to feel as if I'm already working on an existing track. So being able to add in these effects early on into the production makes it a lot more enjoyable to produce a song later, and it feels more alive than just having a synth that's just doing an arpeggio or a bass line. And it just kind of makes the track feel like it's closer to being done than it really is. But it's a psychological thing for me, which I think can help a lot of people to get more and more into the groove of their track early on. So I created here what I'm going to just call like the bus effects, and I'm going to set up a couple of different things. I'm going to set up a bunch of channels here for my uplifters, which are essentially any type of effects that go from left to right, where it's like. And then I'm going to be setting up a bunch of effects for my downlifters, which are the opposite of that. They're the sounds that kind of go down. So we're going to hear some examples of that right now. But first, let me go ahead and start labeling these. So these are going to be all of my uplifters right here. I'm actually going to group these as uplifters. And then I'm going to label these as downlifters. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so now I got two effects groups. I got the uplifters and downlifters. So let's go ahead and go into the Splice library and type in uplifter and see what we get. What I'm looking for, generally speaking, are more kind of like those white, noisy, kind of clean uplifters. I don't really want a lot of stuff with like melodic content. I might put white noise riser in the search, as that might give me some better options. So I like to pick 4 different ones and then kind of, put them throughout the track early on. But the nice thing about having a reference track is that I kind of know where all these uplifters are supposed to go. I know that they're supposed to go before, any of these bigger sections right here, right? So like I know there's going to be one right there, most likely. And so let's go ahead and, bring that in over here. So there we go, we got one there. And then we can start copying this to a lot of different sections. I'm just kind of shortening the duration of that uplifter there. So let's add another one here. Let's add another one there. And let's add another one here, 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 here. So, I mean, I'm kind of just doing this sort of off the bat. And I'll typically go back and, edit these a little bit so that they're not just all over the place. But I like getting these in pretty early on so that I don't have to worry about them later. So I'm going to add a couple more over here. And one thing I like to do with uplifters and things like that is I like to add some reverb to them. So let's just go ahead and grab the Ableton reverb. I like putting a lot of decay on it, so I'm going to put about 6 seconds to 8 seconds on it, so that they're going to sound a bit more like this. Super interesting stuff, I know. But this is the kind of stuff that ends up making your tracks a lot more exciting later down the road. So now we're going to add in some downlifters. So I'm going to get some more white noises. White noises just always sound good. Yeah, that's a great example of what I'm looking for. So let's add some of these. We're going to add one here. And then I'm just going to duplicate those throughout the track. And probably move a couple of these so that they're in the right spots. Right next to all of these lines that I've drawn up as far as my markers. All right, so we got that. Now let's actually move on to some of the drums. So first thing we're going to do is add a kick bus or a kick group. I like to color my drums yellow. Everyone's got their preference, but for some reason, yellow just speaks drums to me. So let's go ahead and add in a drum rack. And let's go ahead and pick some kicks from Splice. There's a lot of great kicks. So let's go ahead and check out some. That one's good. That one's good. That one might have too much low end. So let's go ahead and drop these in here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the reason I'm selecting a lot of kicks is because I want to have an idea once the mix is more developed later on to see which one of these kicks is working best with the type of bass lines that I have. You know, and also a lot of times your kick is going to really be contingent on the frequency spectrum of your root key, right? So if you're playing, you know, if you're creating a song like a G minor, you know, your lowest bass note may not sync well with the kick that you have. So it's important to be able to have a really well-rounded kick that works well with your low end on your bass. So let's go ahead and start with this kick right here. I think this one should probably do the trick. I am going to just repeat it on every quarter. All right, so we got that kick going there. And I'm also going to copy the kick layout from the reference track. So there's no kick here on the reference track. Actually, I'm going to press 1 for this so I can quickly get to it. All right, so we know that that goes there. So now I'm just going to copy these kicks over. There's not going to be any kicks in the breakdown, so we're going to take that out from there. And then we're going to put it here again. And now we kind of know that like kicks are going throughout these whole sections, not here. Where else are we not having kicks? I think over here we don't have any kicks either. Over here as well. And maybe a couple of places where the kick drops out again. And maybe we can do a little bit of gain staging, right? So I like to do everything, and whenever I'm working on tracks, I like to gain stage everything by threes, right? So I try to start out with -3, -6, -9. The reason for that is because it's just a little bit easier when I'm going into a channel, and especially if I have a track with like 200 different channels, I like to know exactly, you know, why I made that decision. Oh, I went to -6 because I thought it needed to be like that specific track needed to be go louder or lower, or whatever. So, you know, I'm going to gain stage everything at -9 dB right now. So this kick right now, I'm using the utility tool. We're going to start out at -9. I'm actually going to go into these guys as well and just start doing everything at -9 so that we have a lot of headroom early on in the mix and we're not having to turn things down later on in the production. All right, so we got that part set up. The next thing I'm going to do is just set up a quick little groove bus or a tops bus. And this is just going to have a bunch of hi-hats and percussion. So let's go ahead back to Splice and let's look at some tops. Typically when I'm trying to add tops into a track, I try to find samples that don't have a lot of snares or anything that's kind of competing with the kick. I like to kind of keep those separate. I like to add in my own claps. This one is sounding pretty good. There we go. And looks like someone turned off the warping, so let's go ahead and make sure that this thing is all warped. we're just going to extend those because we're going to use them throughout the track, and there's going to be moments where we're not going to be using them as much. Let's add another layer of percussion. And, you know, as you can see, we're just slowly building up what kind of feels like Lego building blocks of a track. All right, and so I'm going to consolidate that real quick. And another thing that I like to do is to add a little bit of sidechain to the tops, just so that we can really ensure that like the kick is really sitting well with everything else. So I'm just going to add a little bit of a sidechain compression. We're going to sidechain from the kick, which is right here. And let's go ahead and see what that sounds like. And that just really lets every single kick transient come through the mix nice and neat. And let's go ahead now and add in the first melodic element, which is going to be a drone synth. The reason why I like using drones is because whenever I add in a new element, it really lets me hear what is in key or what's not in key. So I'm just going to call this group bus melodics. And this is probably where the bulk of the melodics of the track are going to go. And I am going to use, let's see, do we have the Selena? Yeah, we do. I really like the sound of the Selena. I just use the same preset every time, but it's the default preset, blue strings. It just sounds really pretty. And it just sits really well in every mix that I make. And I am going to do this song in G minor because it sounds fun. So let's go ahead and bring in this MIDI note right here for G minor. This is going to go, let's actually drag this out to the whole fullness of the track. And I am going to add more notes to this into something like a minor progression. Cool. Let's go ahead and bring back that utility tool. Do -9 on it. Probably a little bit less actually on this one. Let's see, -9. That feels good. All right, I'm going to bring some of these tops, copy some of these over here so we get some of that early groove early on. All right, so now that we got that part set up, it's time to get into some of the groovier melodics. I like starting off with arpeggios or any sort of motif or riff that's going to give the body and the character of the song. So since I have this track in G minor, I'm going to do a search of a sample in Splice that's also in G minor. So I'm going to put in synth, and then I am going to come over here and change the key to G minor. And let's just start going through some sounds and seeing what sticks. So I already love that, so let's go with it. So we're going to actually create a new group called bus samples. The reason I like to separate these is so I know what's samples and what's MIDI information. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in this specific loop over here, because this is where I'm assuming I'm going to probably start the track. And actually, there's one thing that's kind of annoying me about Ableton right now, so I'm going to switch over our record in launch mode into warped loop, auto warp long samples. There we go. That should work better now. So let's go ahead and drop that in one more time. There we go. So far, sounding so good. Let's go ahead and add some sidechain compression. So I'm going to bring in the compressor again, sidechain to the kick, and let's play around with some of these settings to get like a nice groovy and pumping vibe. Amazing. So one of my tricks that I like using a lot in all my productions is this rack that I found by this person named Algonaut, I think, and it's called the Master Effects Rack. And the reason I love it is because you can do cool shit like this. It's really great for transitions, for creating mood and sort of intensity, and so we'll get to play with this a little bit more throughout the track, but let's go ahead and set up the bass now since we got the core melodic set up. And I am going to get a bus called bass here. I like to color my basses blue. Let's go ahead and load up an instance of Serum. I'm just going to use a basic patch that we can edit. And let's go ahead and start writing out some of the bass notes. So we said that this track was in G, so let's go ahead and start writing out a simple pattern that we can follow. I'm just going to use like a really basic 16th note pattern. So that doesn't sound like a bass yet because we got to bring this down a few octaves. And we're going to turn on the filter and do a couple of little sound design things to kind of get this bass to sound the way I want it to. So I'm going to go to the envelope 2, drag that over to the cutoff on the bass, and then we're going to play around with the ADSR on this guy. Get some good sounds out of there. Let's put this cutoff over here. And let's go ahead and add another oscillator and make this one a bit wider maybe. Let's do 7 unison voices and bring this down to, there we go. Now, one of the things we can do with this bass too is we can kind of give it a little bit of a groove. So let's go into the groove pool from within Ableton and maybe pick something that's not got too much swing, but just like a little bit of a hint of a swing. Yeah, there we go. Now let's go ahead and play that back with them. And the only thing we're missing is a little bit of sidechain, so let's go ahead and copy this sidechain over here, paste it in here. So the next thing we need to do is maybe repeat some of the bass notes that are happening in this chord progression. If you're lazy like me and you don't necessarily know every single note that's being played in a sample, you can always drag and drop it into a MIDI channel, or you can click convert melody to new MIDI track. In this case, I think it needs to be harmony because it's got more than a couple of notes. So let's go ahead and do that. And then hopefully that'll give us some indication as to what the bass is doing. And then we can just be able to copy and paste that, edit it a little bit, and it'll give us sort of like a guide in terms of what's actually going on with the melodics. All right, so we got the bass notes. So let's go ahead and copy that over to the bass here. We're going to remove all of this information that we don't need because we just need the bass notes. So we know we don't need this. We probably don't need that stuff either. Don't need this, don't need this. And now it's time to come in here and start getting our bass a little bit more tidy. So now we need to actually listen to the bass line and figure out whether or not those notes are correct. So I'm going to go ahead and there we go. So one of the cool things if you're using Ableton Live 12, if you don't know this tip, if you want to chop up a series of notes into a pattern, so let's say I want the bass notes to be 16th, you can do Command E and it'll chop them out for you. Sounds like we're in the right ballpark. One thing I want to do is just kind of play around with the sidechain a bit on the kick. I'm going to make it mono as well. And I might add a little bit of white noise to the bass. That just kind of gives it a little bit more energy. Now I'm just going to add a clap. Yeah, that one's pretty nice right there. And then I'm just going to add in this right here. There we go. So now we got a nice little clap. Yeah, feels good. Then the last thing we need for now are just going to be some open hats. So we want something to play on the offbeat. Let's get some of those. That wasn't a hat. Oh, that one's perfect right there. There we go. See? The perfect Splice sample is always right around the corner. All right, so let's go ahead and add this drum rack in. And let's start doing some offbeat hi-hats. So start adding those in there and going for the moon. All right, so now that we got that, it's time to add in some beautiful vocal chops because it's not a dance track until you got some dope vocal shots in there. So let's go ahead and add those. I'm just going to create this bus called vocal samples. And let's find some vocal acapellas or one shots or whatever in G minor. That one sounds pretty cool, so I'm going to drop that one in. Let's try another one. Oh, gotta go with that one. That one's just gorgeous. We gotta have that one probably in the breakdown or something, you know, just shimmer it out with a bunch of reverb and delay. And, you know, the goal here is to get enough one-shots and loops of vocals that you can just easily mess around with them and see which ones feel good to you, which ones don't. We can add in some stuff like this as well. That's a good one right there. You know, and I think the key too is to like try to have fun and, you know, sometimes dive into page 10, 12, 20, whatever, you know. You can find some really cool stuff that's not just in the most popular searches. It could be really deep down in the catalog. Like try to really crate dig and find stuff that's unique, that sounds unique to you. All right, so I think we got a good amount of vocals that we can play with. So one thing that I like to do with vocals is I like to put a ton of OTT on them. So if you're not familiar with OTT, it's over the top compression. Just makes everything sound crazy, but really good. And if used wisely, it can make your track sound dope. So I am going to add an OTT, and I'm actually going to put the OTT after the delay because I really want the delay to kind of really stick out and just do some wacky, crazy stuff. So here's an example of what that could sound like, you know, in this breakdown section over here, right? So I'm just gonna make this go like. See how much decay and like just coolness that has. I'm gonna put this vocal over here with the same OTT effect. And then I'm gonna add, you know, another vocal right here. Another one over here. Another one over here. Shoot, let's just add some more vocals to it. I like that one a lot, but I don't like the tail of it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut out the second half of that phrase right here. Just do a little bit of a OTT, man. One thing also you gotta keep in mind with OTT is that it can add a lot of low end, especially with the Ableton preset. So I always try to put a little EQ after it and carve out the lows, because if not, you'll hear a lot of that poppiness. Cool, so we got that part set up. Now the only thing that's really missing is like a good lead or an arpeggio or something that's gonna tie all this magic together. So I'm gonna go and look up arpeggio on Splice and find something that sticks. That one sounds great. So let's go ahead and drop that into our samples. And let's go ahead and find another one. And one thing that's important about this kind of sound is like try to find as many elements that are really simple and percussive that don't have a lot of like note changes, but they just kind of fit in with the groove really well, like this one right here, you know? Just a really simple, but you can make that be in the track throughout the entire track if you know how to filter it in and automate it properly. Those guys are going to be your friends throughout the whole track, so treat them well, figure out where they got to live, and start playing around with filters on them. Matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and add an auto filter because it's just super easy to use and you can automate and know exactly where you need to go with it. So starting out with the track, I'm going to have it filtered in just kind of small and really quiet. So I'm just going to have a really basic filter on it like this. Just kind of have it in the background playing. We're gonna add in this other lead right here, little arpeggio that just kind of feels like it's tying the song together a little bit. So what I did there is I just used that effect rack, which just basically has kind of like a reverb attached to it, and it's got this really cool delay sound. You can hear it here. All right, so now that we got that, we just need to work on the breakdown, and then once we get the breakdown done, we can basically start working on the drop, and that's pretty much it. So I am going to add in a Moog styled synth for the breakdown. I just love using this. It's just got a great sound and it always has a great low end. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the MIDI pattern from here. What I'm going to do with the filter here is I'm going to automate it. So I'm just going to select the Moog filter, automate the cutoff, and just kind of have it start out a little bit more subtle in the beginning. And I'm actually going to edit this a little bit so that it's not so crazy on this part, and I'm going to actually do some low filtering on this section because we want there to be more atmosphere than anything. Here I'm going to start filtering out the kick a little bit so that we're letting the folks know on the dance floor that there's a little break coming where they can just kind of catch their breath. So let's go ahead and do that right here on this bass frequency. And then right there we can also fade out the tops a little bit. So let's go ahead and do that. A lot of people like using volume automation to do this part, but I like using the filters because it just makes it sound a bit more dynamic. And also the volume automation trick is more of a techno thing than a progressive house. And then right there we can probably take these synths out. Here we can maybe add in another melodic element just to kind of keep people interested in what's happening. I'm going to add a ton of delay and effects to that because by itself it's a little dry for my taste. One thing I forgot to do is I do want to add a soft clipper to this track. We also need a little bit of ear candy, so let's find some twinkles and chimes. This especially works great on breakdowns. There we go. Sounds like The Cure. All right, so let's add these in, put a bunch of reverb and delay on it. Let's also add some crashes. So now that we got that first drop done, the next thing to do is for us to build the breakdown into the final drop. But before I do that, I want to start copying a few of the elements from our drop one into this main drop. So I'm just going to copy and paste what we got there. And that way we'll know more or less if we're in the ballpark of this song being a success or not. Copy this part over here. Great. And then we can work on our build. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load an instance of anything really. It can be Spire or Serum. We can use Serum in this case. And what we're going to be building is an effects uplifter. And this is going to be a sound that's going to go like that. So we're going to start with the root note of our track, which is G. So that on its own sounds pretty boring, right? But when you start doing this, that's what we're going to be automating. So let's go ahead and automate the pitch bend. And we're going to be automating this to go from here up to here. And it's going to sound. But we're going to need to add some effects for it not to sound super corny. So let's add in some delay. Let's add in some reverb. And while we're at it, let's also change the sound a little bit. And now we're going to add in some snare rolls, which are some of my favorite things to do. I love making these, and I love making customs of these and then saving them for later so I don't have to repeat the process. But let's go ahead and start off by drawing in a long line, doing Command E. And then what I like doing sometimes with these is like putting triplets in them and stuff like that. So like here I'm going to do popping some of those. Let's maybe add a little bit of a bit warmer. And we are going to copy this over here. This is actually going to go like this. Just realized we don't have an equal length of bars here, so we're going to actually add one more bar to this build. So it's going to look like this. And we're actually just going to sustain this note for this part. So it's just going to be on G. And we're going to redraw that snare build over here. So let's go ahead and consolidate those. And let's make sure that the automation looks good. So we actually got to make this go from 50 to, yeah, there we go. And then we're going to take this one out because we don't need that sound for this part. And we're just going to, and to be honest, this is one of the parts of the songs that can usually take the longest to really nail down. There's just, takes a lot of work to do these. And I'm actually going to put this on the master so that we can really get that build sounding nice and hot here. And turning it down right there. Yeah, we're going to take this one out here. Right here before the drop, just do like a little clack clack, something like that, something real basic. This can go, let's see, let's make this nice and big right here. then for this last drop, we just need one more element just to kind of make it feel like it's big. So I don't know, let's find a synth or something in G minor. And honestly, not having a plan sometimes in terms of what you're looking for can be exciting because you can just open the possibilities up to anything. I like that. It's right up my alley for sure. Add a bit warmer on it. And let's make sure that our filter is off at this point. Let's bring the filter on this guy down a little bit. And I might add in one more bass, kind of like a groovier bass. I'm gonna use Serum again. And let's get this bass line to be a bit more shorter, a little bit less open. There we go. So. So let's go ahead and play it from the beginning. I'm just going to be adding in some extra ear candy. pretty much it. The rest is really just ironing out all the little different sections with your favorite effects, fills, hi-hats, closed hats. But that's the basis of Lego blocks of music, right? Or the way I like to see it too is just like building a puzzle, figuring it out. And the cool thing about this puzzle is that you get to draw it at the end. Hope you enjoyed this quick little tutorial on how to create a progressive deep house from scratch. Check out the link in the comments for the download.